Good morning, everyone. It's Mr. Johnston here. I'm here in the classroom making a video for instruction at home. Yesterday, we tried a ClassKick activity second block, and I guess the Wi-Fi connection here at school or the load on the platform just really kind of overloaded it. You can see here, some of my students were able to do the work, some of them weren't. So trying to give you kind of instruction that's a workaround so that you can do this on ClassKick, maybe later on your own. Obviously, you could always print out the PDF that's right below where you see the links and then annotate that, take pictures of it. I mean, there's a workaround even there. In future, I might also make Google Slides of the presentation. The advantage of ClassKick is that I can see your work and I can help you as you go. If you have questions, I can see right at your desk what you're doing. So I do hope the platform will work, but in case it doesn't, we'll have to figure out these workarounds as we go, all right? So here in the classroom, normally I don't go into ClassKick with you. I jump into my flip chart, okay, which looks exactly like the first couple of pages that you have there. I'm going to reset my page so that I've been practicing a little bit here in the classroom, and hopefully that way you guys can see exactly what you would see if you were doing this activity at home, okay? So let's do this. I'm going to do this in bright red so you can see it super big. Here we go. All right. So the whole reason we're doing this in the first place is to understand the reasons why we might have a shift of the supply curve. And because there are so many reasons in TRNDPETS, I wanted to give you kind of a cheat sheet. This will take the guesswork out of the homework tonight so that you will know that when you read something that's in a prompt, you now have a way to figure out which direction to shift that curve. And remember, the supply curve is upward sloping, so it might throw you off if you've been doing your demand homework lately. So TRNDPETS is our acronym. We're going to remember the T in TRNDPETS, that's technology. Increases in technology always tend to move the supply curve forward, provided the technology works, right? So here we have an increase in technology as kind of our key. Whenever we see more robots or more smart factory equipment brought into the productive process that increases output, then we're basically going to take our supply curve that I'm abbreviating as an S and shift it forward. I hope that shorthand makes sense. That way you have a directional way to shift your curve when you read a prompt that falls into something in TRNDPETS. Now, if I have a decrease in technology, which is rarely ever going to happen, we tend to go forward, not backward, right? But let's just say, for instance, that we have a shutdown of all the tech on campus. Well, that's going to do the opposite, and that's going to shift our supply curve backward. So you got to realize this could go one way or the other, but at least you know the proper direction. Okay, so turn these arrows around in your mind if you need to, but we're going to leave these on the left all pointing up, all right? Resource cost is the R in TRNDPETS, and that basically applies to anything that a producer has to pay for, including things like materials, labor, basically anything tied to the 4 factors of production. So that means that sometimes resource costs rise and those bills get higher. Well, that means that it gets harder for the seller to get output off the factory floor, okay? Some of the resource costs you'll be seeing in your homework: gasoline prices, transportation is something that producers have to pay for, shipping. If you've bought anything on Amazon, Amazon knows that resource cost really well. So the idea is that resource costs are always going to be wreaking havoc on supply. Number of sellers is the same as number of stores in the market, right? You open a new store, well, you've just increased the market supply. And we're going to see the results of that later, but for now, increasing the number of sellers, increasing the number of stores or suppliers, that means the total supply is going to increase in that market. For disasters, the D in TRNDPETS, we're talking about disasters that could be natural, like hurricanes, forest fires, earthquakes, or man-made, civil war, civil unrest, protests, anything that might disrupt the economic system. If those tend to get more prevalent, then what we're going to see is supply decrease and go backwards to the left. All right, the P. Prices of other goods the seller could sell. Now you got to be careful here with me. We're talking about prices of things that are outside of our market. This is kind of like substitutes for sellers, where they can look at profit margins and go, hey, If this market is not making me any money, then essentially I could get out of it, go to something else, and I now am going to decrease my supply of this thing. So let's say, for instance, I'm a farmer and I grow corn. If I find out that wheat prices are really going through the roof, I can supposedly change my market to wheat and not make any corn, and it's going to show up like this in the corn market. Okay, if prices for wheat rise, then I'm going to sell the thing that makes me the most profit. Okay. Expectations of future price, just like buyers, it's kind of like if the future price is going to move around a little bit, then we're going to change our behavior today. And if the future price rises, then that means essentially we're going to wait and hold back on our supply until people are willing to give us the highest price possible. So you would think the opposite, right? If prices are rising in the future, I would gear up for that. And that may very well be the case, but we're talking about the goods that end up on the market, and you don't want to sell at the moment that your prices are low. You as a seller like high prices, remember? So expectations of future price, if that rises, then we're going to pull back on our supply until people are willing to give us the most money possible. Taxes and subsidies go together. These are government involvement in the market where you see increases in taxes, you're going to see a decrease in supply. Think of it as an additional resource cost. If companies are having to pay for that, then they're not able to pay for the other things they need that are part of resource costs, okay? This might also apply to regulation. If the government puts a new law in place that companies have to abide by, but it's an unfunded mandate where companies have to pay for it themselves, then that's an additional cost that pulls away from the productive process. Subsidies are the opposite of that. When you get a government subsidized situation, basically the government's cutting you a check and they're helping you with the cost of production because they want to see more of what you make. This applies to agriculture. Lots of industries are subsidized to some extent. So this would actually help supply. And now you have your cheat sheet. Okay, so I hope that's helpful as a cheat sheet. I also wanted to demonstrate the other pages of the activity. My page looks a little different than yours. You have price and quantity. I've gone ahead and drawn supply, demand, and marked our starting points, okay? Just like demand, the mechanism is the same. So the idea is you're just changing the orientation of the curve, right? Downward sloping demand curve is what we worked on last time. Well, now we're working on the upward sloping supply curve. I'm going to give you some scenarios, okay, so that you can see exactly what you need to see. This is our market that you can go into the blank on the side and type in. I'm going to give you a situation. We'll say steel prices rise, okay? So steel prices rise, that is a resource cost, and by looking back at my cheat sheet, I can see resource costs rise, then supply is going to go to the left, okay? So I'm going to go over here, put my supply curve in place to the left, parallel to the first, and then see what the market is telling me, okay? Really try not to predict price and quantity just yet. You're going to confuse yourself if you do. Just look at where the two curves intersect. That's where we were. This is where we are after the change. So now we know what's going to happen with price. We know what's going to happen with quantity as a result of that rise in steel prices, right? The car market will see fewer cars. Less selection means higher prices, but that's happening because of this thing right here, okay? And that's a little different than a price change. Remind yourself with arrows, bringing that backwards so that we can see this is not moving up or down. Those are the words we never ever say. We shift that backwards, right? So that you know that this is a decrease, even though the curve kind of looks like it's higher than the original curve, okay? The effect on the market, we had some shorthand, right? Where we had delta D before, now we've got delta S. And we can tie to that word that this is a shift, right? I'll show you movement in just a second, but now we have our market, we have our situation, we have the effect on the market, we know what's happening to price, we know what's happening to quantity right down here. Now we just need our reason from TRNDPETS, and you guys know looking back, we were already talking about resource costs, all right? So I want to see somewhere, probably over on the right, you're going to type in resource costs. I'm going to put an R right down here to back up our drawing, Okay, let's move on. Number 2, I'm going to give you guys a market. Let's use Flex Seal. That's a popular demand item, right? Okay, let's say, and I better trademark that sucker. We're going to put Flex Seal on sale. Okay. Well, the customers we know already will love that. Buyers like lower prices. But that means that we have to come in here and see what our sellers are up to just by dropping the price. That means the higher price was at a 1, the lower price after the change is at a 2. That's not like 2 is suddenly more valuable than 1, so don't get confused. Okay, take your line, draw it across the market. Now we were right here. We got to look and see today on our homework where our sellers are going to go. I don't want you worrying about buyers right now. We did that last class. So I'm only interested in knowing the selling point right there. And you can see that lower price is a disincentive to make more for sale. To show what kind of change we're seeing here, I want you to highlight that or draw your arrow and say, this is a movement, right? We went from one place to another. It is not a shift. So we now know some more shorthand. A delta means change. We're going to say quantity supplied. And that's going to give us the idea that this is a movement. Okay? The only reason I can draw a movement is right over here on the side, price. So now we should have all pieces or parts of the equation, our market, our situation, the effect, price, we knew that, we were given that, quantity, and now we have the reason price, okay? I want you to look back though, and I'm gonna need to move myself out of the way. There we go. You can see now the difference between a change in supply and a change in quantity supplied. If you look at number 1, I've got 2 supply curves there, dramatic shift. If you look at number 2, all we're really doing is sellers is adjusting to a new quantity supplied. We're not changing the supply curve at all. It's fixed, it's stable. But that lower price just drops down the quantity we're willing to supply at that price. So you can see basically what you need to see the difference here if you look visually. My real concern is that if you look at a multiple choice question without a picture, a change in supply sounds a lot like a change in quantity supplied, but we're talking about very different phenomenon, okay? So we'll keep looking back at that to see what we need to take a look at. Okay, I'm gonna move this back down and we'll go on. Number 3, another product, let's say, oh gosh, I have no idea. How about corn? We used that before. Okay, let's say that we get some new government subsidies for corn. Maybe we're trying to make more ethanol. I'll give a plus sign, so that's our situation. More government payments to increase our supply of this very important product, all right? Well, because you guys know already that that's a subsidy, and it's right there in the S in TRNDPETS, then we know that we should probably be increasing our supply. Okay, that means that we're shifting forward. Okay, do you see how this can be challenging if you're thinking up and down? That's just not the way to go, guys. There's supply 1, there's supply 2, and it's an increase in supply. Okay, again, don't try to guess what's happening here. Look at where we were, look at where we are now. Okay, come over here. Put in your lower price as a result. Put in your higher quantity, sorry. Okay, now this should be the effect that we expect, that increasing the supply of corn is gonna lower the market price. Any farmer knows that, but it'll make it more available if you're gonna use a large portion of it for ethanol production, right? So that means that government's probably gonna have to support this, support the farmers that are involved here, but at least they've achieved their increase in corn. Okay. Now, sometimes when you see an increase in supply, and theoretically you should see a lower price in the market, you may not always. It's up to the corporate bigwigs to figure out if they want to lower prices or not. So the idea is that you may not actually see this at the store when you buy your corn, but the idea is theoretically we should be able to offer that at a lower price, okay? Our market's corn, an increase in subsidies is our situation. We're gonna use some shorthand here, delta S, okay, change in supply, and that goes with shift. The reason here we've already said, it's basically the same as the situation this time, the S. And TRNDPETS subsidies gives us our idea. Okay, there's the market, there's the situation, here's the effect, here's what happens to price, here's what happens to quantity, and this gives us our reason. Okay, so looking back now, you guys can see the difference between, let's see here, I hope you can. Difference between, there's a decrease in supply, there's an increase in supply. This would be considered a decrease in quantity supplied, so we need one more part of the puzzle and then you'll have a complete word bank for homework tonight. Moving forward to number 4. There we go. All right, so let's say we're talking about, I have no idea, Halloween decos, Halloween decorations. Abbreviating that, Halloween decorations, decos, okay? I have to be really ambiguous here because I don't want to see a shift in supply. We need an example of what something looks like when the price rises. So let me say this, price rises, okay? To be really careful with this one so that we don't shift our demand curve or shift our supply curve. So sorry for the generic idea, but this gives me a chance to show you, okay, price rises. All we do, increase 1 to 2, draw a line across the market, okay? Now I have to look where my sellers are. This is where we were. And I go up here to the northeast little quadrant I've created, and there we are right there, okay? Higher prices for sellers are like an incentive to make more, even though buyers are probably gonna buy less at that high price. So we'll be talking about, prices that are not equilibrium and what they create coming up, okay? So that's an increase there. What you have here is, again, not a shift, but a movement to a new spot on the stable curve. That means that we now know the shorthand delta QS, change in the quantity supplied, and that goes with movement. Okay? So the only reason we can draw a flat line price change is price itself. If the price just changes, then your answer's kind of already there. Okay? There's your market, there's your situation, this is your outcome. We're given basically what happens to price, and now we know what happens to sellers and quantity as a result. This is the reason, okay? So something that'll help you guys on the homework is to memorize TRNDPETS if you can. If not, then you can look back at your ClassKick activity and see what you need to see. So we'll look back together. We've got examples basically of every possible outcome tonight, and you've got your cheat sheet. So hopefully that'll be a workaround in case ClassKick doesn't work later on today. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.